We love that. I'm hopeful that we'll have some UC people joining us this evening. They've been a lot of outreach, and I really do think we need to engage our local universities and colleges a little bit more in the zero waste fight than we have. But as Ed Sullivan would say, we've got a really good shoe tonight. And you wonder, well, does that mean a big boot or something? No, he said a really great shoe. But we have a great show tonight. Last month, we had people speak about ways that zero waste can save the planet. And prominently, two of those ways were more compost and less plastic. So tonight we switched the dial a little bit, and we've asked people to speak who are actually put their money where their mouth is and made businesses out of these things. We have a compost business operator, and in honor of Plastic Free July, we've got two business operators who are dedicated to ending plastic. Plus, we've got a very famous lawyer who I'm going to talk to about a case that she's recently filed that's also targeted plastic. So we've gone from the policy of saving the planet through these things to the practice of saving the planet through these things. And I think it's going to be great. But we're going to start tonight with something from the Recycling Archives, which we do every month. We have a presentation about some pioneer in the recycling business that did something important and participated in an oral history project that Dan Knapp started and Susan Kinsella is now in charge of. So tonight, our featured pioneer is Will Bakx, who's on the call already. He's also going to talk about his business later in the show, but right now we're going to read some portions from his archives interview, and I'm going to introduce it a little bit, which is hard to do reading and at the same time looking at the camera, but I'll try. Will Bakx grew up in the Netherlands. The farms there had compost piles, but he wasn't until he came to the United States and worked on the student farm at Sonoma State University that he really got into the complexities of composting and became an expert in it. Then, in 1985, he developed an entrepreneurial business that designed many different kinds of compost that met customers' specific needs and also helped to heal the soil. So in the interview, Will was asked, why do people need different kinds of compost? How do they use them differently? And what does this one do versus that one? And Susan will read his response.
Okay, here's what Will said in his interview to that question about why do we need all these different composts? He said, I look at different pathways. I ask, what are the resources that are coming in? What does this resource provide to the compost? And then I ask, what are my customers coming in for? What questions do they ask? What are their needs? And then, can I make something that puts that product to a higher use? My company came into the field with the understanding that you make soil amendments to feed the soil to get plant response. You make something that the customer wants. For example, I had one group of vehicles coming into the composting yard with feedstocks that were mostly from landscapers and people who didn't have garbage service. I evaluated the material and I concluded, self-haul loads have more carbon in it, more trees, more shrubs, more branches, more tough woody fiber. Do I really want to compost this material for 18 weeks? Or can I do something different with it? And here was the big clue. I saw that the self-haul material was absolutely clean, whereas the materials from the green recycling can always had some level of contamination, and you couldn't get the green recycling can stuff totally clean. You always had some plastics and metals to screen out later. So I thought, okay, what if I could make a mulch out of the clean woody self-haul material? I knew that people want to have something to put on the surface of the soil to suppress weeds, to conserve moisture, to get a nice clean look. Uncomposted mulch would be cheaper, and being fibrous, it would last longer than finished compost. By selling ground up plant debris as mulch, we could market it as landscape cover, and our mulches became immensely popular. I started out with one guideline for mulch. It had to be physically attractive, and the landscapers loved it. Rather than composting it for 18 weeks, I got it finished in 18 days out the door. It was so popular that during the high seasons, spring and fall, I could sell futures of that material. I sold stuff that wasn't even cut yet. For 5-6 weeks ahead, it was all sold already. People were on a waiting list. It was that popular. Then other people said, well, I have sandy soil and I need a compost for that. And still others said, I've got clay soil and I need a compost for that. The sandy soil people needed more organic matter, more humus. The clay people needed something that would loosen up the heavy soil. Now, clay people needed the humus too, something that would increase porosity, make it looser, but you don't want to add sand to clay because that's what makes soil act like adobe bricks when it hardens. Then a duck ranch fellow came to me who had duck manure with rice hulls. He had a problem getting rid of it. He said, Will, can you help out and take this material? The hulls are the hard coatings that are removed from the rice seed that we eat. And I said, well, I cannot take your material and compost it here because I'm running out of capacity, but I'll teach you on-farm composting. That will reduce its volume so you won't have to haul it so often, and I'll take everything you produce. I found that the rice hulls really help break up a clay soil, make it a lot easier for the roots to penetrate. So with the duck manure and the rice hulls, we made what we called Mallard Plus, another product. The compost product we made from rice hulls became popular with the clay soils people who loved it. There were other questions people came in with. I'm growing natives that don't like a lot of nitrogen, or I'm growing vegetables and flowers that like a lot of nitrogen. So the need was, I want low nitrogen and I want high nitrogen. Well, we had another customer coming in who had loads of chicken feathers to dispose of. Now, chicken feathers are 12% nitrogen. He said, can you do something with these feathers? And I said, well, let me play with it. And by golly, I was able to make a compost that was double the nitrogen content I had in my regular compost. And my compost processing time went from 14 weeks to 10 weeks. So I got a faster production and a higher nitrogen product that I could sell for more money. Kind of sounds like he's a chef, right?
Yeah.
And then Will continues, I have come more to believe that you have to look at process thinking. It's not like, oh, here comes the waste hauler and he or she brings some material to us. You have to put yourself at the source because that's where making good compost starts. The same thing applies to all recycling. Our society is trained to be a throwaway society, and when we're done with a product, it's discarded. We need to teach our people to respect our resources. When we respect the material we've used and we're done with it, we are actually not done with our responsibility to see it upgraded and conserved. At the point of discard, you have to make sure that the product you discard doesn't, quote unquote, go away into a landfill or burn plant. You let it go only when you can give it another life. And that means you have to respect that resource when you let go of it. You have to make sure it can be used for its highest source or its highest use in the end. And that means a clean product. And that's a design issue, right? Why don't we think design through so that we have products that are okay even in the end of the line? We don't do that enough. To me, that should be a regulatory requirement. You cannot design a product and release it when it does not have a complete cycle. So you look at a product and you ask, why are you really making this? Now, capitalism says, how can I extract money out of it right now? How can I make you want something that maybe you might not really need? How can I get you to pay me so I can make money on this? I think we need to get to a circular economy that says, how can I invest in something that actually will regenerate what we're doing and close the cycle? Can I close the cycle with something I can make? If you can't close the cycle with regeneration, then you probably should not produce it. It's the only way we're going to get to zero waste.
That was a great reading. And, we're going to have one more reading from Will a little bit later to talk about his business. And you can ask him all your questions about what kind of compost is right for you. But the next thing we're going to do is we try to be topical on the ZWAC show. And, somebody I knew made the newspaper in a very positive, amazing way. And that's attorney Sumona Majumdar, who is the general counsel of the Earth Island Institute. Now, that's a big deal in my view. Earth Island was founded by David Brower, who was the executive director of the Sierra Club for many years, a famous mountaineer, a World War II decorated veteran, and probably as amazing and as an environmental advocate as there's been, almost ever. So Earth Island today you know, oversees a lot of important projects. They serve as the fiscal sponsor of a lot of nonprofits. And so Earth Island oversees a lot of people that do a lot of important good work, like the Plastic Pollution Coalition, like the Rainforest Action Network. So Sumona, as general counsel, is sort of the overseer of the overseers. And in that capacity, because she doesn't like plastic very much either, she finds ways to attack the plastic people. And so I saw on the Chronicle recently that Earth Island had brought a new lawsuit. And so I asked her to come tonight and talk about the new lawsuit, like, what is this about? So thank you for joining us, Sumona, and take it away.
Yeah, happy to be here. So, I mean, it goes back to, what Susan, you were reading about Will, is this idea that when we put a product out in the world, at the outset, there needs to be a consideration of what's going to happen at the end, right? And as we've seen with plastic and the many products that are packaged in plastic, there hasn't been that thought put into what are we going to do with all of this plastic. And now here we are drowning in plastic that we don't have the capacity or the technology to recycle in a way that will really allow it to have full value reuse. And but yet we have all these other types of, models to introduce products into the world, reusable models that use other materials that can be more readily recycled or composted, or, hey, maybe just a little bit less packaging. That also wouldn't be such a bad thing. Even I remember times when things were, packaged in just one layer of a material instead of three. So that's been the driving principle behind these lawsuits. And we, at Earth Island, saw plastic as a issue that was really cutting across a lot of our projects' work. So we have projects like Plastic Pollution Coalition, which are, really focused on the issue of eliminating plastic pollution. But then we have projects, that are working on marine mammal conservation and ocean protection. And we have projects that are dealing with, fighting for communities that are at the front line of, toxic industry, dealing with the impact of toxic industries like plastic production. So it was an issue that really allowed us to bring together a number of our projects and do some, hopefully effective litigation. So the recent Chronicle piece was about this lawsuit we filed in DC Superior Court against Coca-Cola on the narrow issue of claims that commitments really that Coca-Cola is making around its intent to use recycled content in its bottles and to collect a bottle for every bottle that it puts out in the world and recycle that bottle. Now, these are noble goals. We certainly would love if Coca-Cola could achieve that, but they've made commitments like this for the past at least 30 years, starting back 1990s. They started making commitments about the amount of recycled content that they would use in their plastic bottles. They then revised down that commitment and then just sort of quietly, let it disappear from their public statements. Given the volume of plastic that Coca-Cola puts out in the world every year, it's hard to, we just simply can't see any way to, that these commitments are feasible. So, and yet they're plaster. I mean, they did a Super Bowl ad on this. It's all over their website. They're really going hard on it, and it's not surprising, right? Because the issue of plastic pollution has become really prevalent in the the public media landscape, and people are concerned about it. And so we are claiming that Coca-Cola, that this is false advertising. And DC has a particularly consumer friendly, or at least easier standard for bringing lawsuits on behalf of consumers when it's a nonprofit that's bringing the lawsuit. So there's been some successful litigation in the past that nonprofits have brought around, greenwashing, and other sort of false claims. And so our strategy was to bring it in DC so that we could withstand a motion to dismiss for standing purposes. So long as you're a nonprofit that's working in this space and that on the issue that relates to the false advertising, then you have standing to sue. So that's that lawsuit, and it was just filed at the beginning of June, and we expect that Coca-Cola will file its answer or its motion to dismiss, which likely will file a motion to dismiss in September. So it's really at the beginning stages, but we feel really optimistic based on the strong case law in DC that we'll be able to continue this lawsuit to the merits.
That's great. I have a number of young, they're grown up now, but I've had a number of young nieces and nephews. And in my attempt to advertise why they should become lawyers, which I've been unsuccessful at, I keep telling them it's like a superpower, because you can make a bad person do something they don't want to do, right? So in your case, you're trying to make Coca-Cola do something they don't want to do. And it's interesting because at these NICRA conferences over the years, we've heard nonprofits like As You Sow come talk about how they've convinced Coca-Cola to adopt these, great standards. And I'd always think, it's great to say, not so easy to do. And it sounds like this lawsuit is targeting that they didn't do what they said they were going to do, and you're going to try to make them do what they said they're going to do. Is that about it?
Yeah, I mean, ideally they'll live up to their commitments. At a minimum, at a minimum they stop making these statements and inducing, trying to convince consumers that they're this environmentally friendly and sustainable company. I really recommend the Changing Markets Foundation report that was it's called Talking Trash. It was released in September 2020, and it really talks about this history of commitments that Coca-Cola has made, and just like the long history of broken promises, as well as all the efforts Coke has made to fight against like bottle deposit bills and bag bills and all those things.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about what kind of resources that Coca-Cola and their allies can bring to this kind of a fight? Because it's pretty daunting, I think.
Yeah, well, it's maybe better since we're a little further along in our other lawsuit. I saw a hand, Neil.
You're muted. Neil, you need to unmute.
Sorry. Please, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to talk after you finish. I have a question after you finish.
No problem. So our other lawsuit, which we brought here in California against Coca-Cola, as well as 9 other food, beverage, and consumer goods companies for both their statements about recyclability, as well as their contribution to the plastic pollution problem. That lawsuit, so we filed that in February of 2020. It took about a year for the court to decide whether or not it's going to stay in state court. For the federal court to decide whether they were going to take it up or allow it to stay in state court. We stayed in state court, and now we are dealing with a motion to quash based on personal jurisdiction. So basically Coca-Cola and all the other out-of-state defendants are saying you can't sue us here in California for these types of claims. And we are just, it is every step of the way, delay and refusal to, do the things you're really like supposed to do in litigation. We are they have an obligation to turn over documents about their contacts with the state of California. They're just refusing. I mean, everything is going to be a full battle from day one. So, you know, they have a fancy law firm that's based in Atlanta.
How many lawyers do they have? Keep total aggregate on the other side.
You know, I'm not totally sure exactly how many lawyers they have on the other side, because I haven't been in all of these discovery disputes. I mean, we have, I guess, 3 lawyers on our lawsuit here in California. I think Coca-Cola has, like, right now, like a team of 5 or 6, but of course, each defendant is a team of 5 or 6, so now you have 50.
There's 20 behind them. Working the
Yeah, no, and
great.
that's the thing, like, and it will expand, right? So as the lawsuit goes on, the number of lawyers that they will put on it will go up.
Why did you decide to do the new case when you had the other one already going on?
The new one's slightly different. It is more about their kind of future pledges about the sustainability and you know, and their commitments around taking bottles back and recycling them into new bottles. It's really just sort of, if we have attorneys that are willing to represent us in these cases, we're kind of happy to do them. You know, it's not going to be easy, and we don't know which strategy is going to move quickly. And, like, you know, our lawsuit here in California has already taken a long time just on this jurisdiction issue. So we feel like this is a really important issue, and as much as we can bring it to light, we will.
Well, thank you for coming and telling us about it in Plastic Free July, because we want to be plastic free.
Yes.
Are you willing
No
to
problem.
Anybody else?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to thank you for undertaking the suits. Keeping these issues in front of the public is very important. And I also want to point out that we're trying to get them to do not zero waste. We're trying to get them to recycle when in fact we want refillables. And several organizations are coming up with what we're referring to as best bottle bill ever, which at least the ones that I'm working on are going to be recommending mandated refillables 10% by 2030, et cetera, until we get, let's say, 2050 to, you have to use refillables. So thank you for the work. It's very important. I think it's their TV ads are an indication that we're winning. They're screaming for EPR when in fact they don't need EPR to do the right thing, and you're forcing them to address it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And yeah, refillable is the model, and we used to have it.
Yeah.
So can we just go back?
At least Dan and I are old enough to remember that. Maybe some others.
Oh, I
I
remember. I remember.
Okay, good.
Fillable.
Yeah, you always have to be aware of greenwashing. I mean, now that Recology in San Francisco had to pay, you know, a $10 million fine for cheating their customers, all of a sudden you see all these ads on TV about how green they are. It's just marvelous. So thank you for doing
You're
it.
welcome.
Thank you for being here.
Have
And
to run,
welcome to stay. We're gonna move on to other things. And if,
I think.
if you want to get your kids to sleep, tell them about standing. What are the rules about standing, right?
Have a good evening.
Thanks. So we're going to move on to our next phase. Like I mentioned earlier, we talked about policy last time, how zero waste can save the planet. So now tonight we're going to focus on the people that are doing the things to save the planet. And we have 4 speakers. They're all going to get more or less 500 uninterrupted minutes, and then everybody's going to be open for questions. And I'm going to start with Dr. Neil Selman, because he's done research for years and years and years and years about why resource recovery businesses are the key to zero waste and diversion from landfill. And that's going to segue into 3 people who are actually walking the walk. We're going to have Stephanie Rainey of Feel Good, who's going to talk about the fillable bottles, just like Neil was talking about. We're going to have Nikki Kozlowski of Wisdom Supply, also an anti-plastic business. And then we're going to come back to Will Bakx, who's going to talk more about composting, because I love talking about compost. So Neil, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, John, could you remind me how much time should I take in this initial 5 minutes? Okay, well, I prepared 10 minutes, so I will speak in my Brooklyn at Brooklyn speed. I will. I think I could do this. I'll start with a general point. Small businesses are critical to the health of the country, not only the economy, but the whole psychology, the whole politics of the country. If you recall, Jefferson said the country will succeed if we have small farmers and small businesses, and of course the country did not succeed. And so we are all subjects to monopolies. Fortune 500 produce our things, and monopolies on the other side take them away, and we get charged and we get lousy services and lousy products. I will start my presentation by quoting someone you may have heard of, Dan Knapp, who taught me long ago that recycling companies can outcompete waste companies routinely if we get access to the materials. And I think Dan, among others on the call, have proved that. What they need, what we need now is capital going to both cities and small businesses. And when they work together, miracles can happen, quote unquote miracles. And I would point to the reuse corridor serving the Appalachian states of, not the entire states, but Ohio, Southern Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia, where they have compiled in the leveraged federal, local, nonprofit and money, and have created a network of 20, 30 businesses over maybe a 500-mile range that are doing terrific things. I urge you to look them up, and also on the Institute's webpage, we did a piece on them. The other basic situation we're living with is, of course, the unfair competition since RECRA 1976. We've all been at a disadvantage because the laws favored private landfills. There was absolutely no money to support public landfills. As a result, we have these monopolies. Independent thinking is, independent businesses are critical because they produce independent thinkers, and they also create middle-class families, which can then people like myself and several others on the call, I'm sure, could graduate from college without debt and become activists instead of becoming lawyers or whatever. I mean, you could become a lawyer activist too, but a lawyer activist doesn't make hundreds of thousands. So there is a chart that I put up there, sent to John, if he could put it up or not, I don't know. But the bottom line is that for 30 years, using dual stream and grassroots approaches, we've got to 35%. And then for 20 years, it has been, oh, there we go. Thank you so much for putting that up. This is my, my past and future. All we have to do if you go to 2020 is start reinvesting in dual stream and local control. And we can get back on path, as we've seen, that can take us to 75% and even more zero waste. The only thing that can interrupt, all of us have been blessed by being on the right side of history. So even when things go bad, we know we're doing the right thing. I think time is on our side. I don't think anything is inevitable. I think time is on our side if we work hard and get the resources we need. This is why the Institute and many on this call have been opposed to this extended producer responsibility lobbying phenomena to try to put all of us under the control of a corporate monopoly exempt from tax law, not only tax laws, but also federal antitrust laws. It's the end game for the big companies. It cuts off, it's the national preemption. You folks in California are aware of preemptions. Pepsi-Cola blackmailed you, not you, but the state a few years ago into imposing preemptions on local activity. EPR is and the end game nationally, and they will completely put us out of business in terms of citizen activism if if these corporations can start writing their own laws, which is what would happen. The response has been incredibly heartening. Gaia, NRC, Sierra Club, after a long dialogue, thanks to Dan and Mary Lou and many others, we've convinced those three that if you do have to go to EPR, you go to municipal reimbursement, which is basically a tax on packaging. I don't think that is the best solution. The best solution is no EPR, and I'll get to that in a minute, what's happening on the national negotiations. I just want to point out that the alternative to EPR, to start funneling money to cities and towns to build their infrastructures, which we all know what to do, is the Recycling is Infrastructure 2 campaign, being coordinated by the Institute, NRC, and Guy, oh boy, who else is there? Zero Waste USA. And we will be putting out a lot of information. I point out that the negotiations, the discussions at the state level on EPR are absolutely fascinating and healthy, and people are finding out what they're going to get or what they're not going to get. And I think the grassroots response to this EPR threat has been sensational. We are educating the country. I have to skip a whole lot of things, but I want to talk about California. Many of you know that I was trained by California people years ago in the 70s. Rick Anthony, he's probably not on this call, but John Holes, Bernie Meyerson, Kathy Evans, and a whole host of other people who share their information with me. So I'm hesitant to make any comments about California, but I'm going to anyway. I came to California as an acolyte, and I'm now giving you some avuncular advice. I read very briefly, and I have to go over it again, the 30 recommendations from your commission on what to do next. I think it's a very timid document. It doesn't mention so many things. The EPR section is completely silly and will put you all under a PRO dictatorship. It just makes no money, no sense. It says that recycling market development is important, but then it says putting money into that pocket is not the highest priority. You're also facing a privatization bill about privatization of your bottle bill, which is another insult to us, taking public control and giving it into the private hands. I know Cal Recycle has been recalcitrant. They've even been involved in skullduggery and incompetence. Take the program away from them, put it back under the control of people, whether an old solid waste management board, which was of course political, but I figure political is better than bureaucrats without any control. And they fell victim. I don't want to get into the details, but clearly you have to avoid a private bill. The other things, two major things I would suggest you focus on. One is the surcharge on all garbage going into landfills and incinerators in the state. Gary Liss has been pointing that out for years. The other is the service fees that Dan and Mary Lou have just negotiated for reusers. We need refillables. I think those are the things you should focus on. I think the 30 recommendations that I have to go through again are nibbling at the edges, and that this is a crisis. And I think California and the rest of the country should be quite bold, because we know what we're doing. Our decentralized systems work. Just look at the map, the chart, and you will see what big industry did to us and will do to us if we don't reclaim and relocalize recycling. And that's my 5 minutes, which is probably 8 minutes, so I apologize.
Well, thank you, Neil, for doing that. It's kind of a perfect segue into Stephanie, because she, we talk a lot about alternatives to plastic, and a lot of us older folks on this call remember having a milkman, and they actually came and delivered milk, and they took the empty bottle away, and they brought back more milk. And that doesn't seem like such a bad thing. I don't know why we ever did away with it. Plus, you had all these off-color jokes about children who look like the milkman, which we don't have anymore. So Stephanie, why in the world did you go into this business? And what kind of challenges, like Neil was talking about, do you face? Because you're going up against Coke and Pepsi and all these.
Yeah.
So how do you do it? Why did you do it?
So I can share my presentation, but basically I started doing it. Like I had my shop in 2015 when I first, like before 2015, let's say I was just, I was recycling my waste. I was being careful, but not at all about plastics. And I was like, plastic is recyclable. So, there's no issue with that. And then 2015, I saw that video with the turtle that has the straw in her nose. And I was really shocked. I was like, that's the impact of plastic on us, on our environment. And I started digging and I felt guilty. So at home, I started reducing waste, reducing plastic, trying shampoo bars, And then after that, in early 2016, there was that report about called the New Plastics Economy that said by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. And that was my second shock. I was like, there's no way, like, how can this happen? So at that point, I was like, changing my habits is great, but it's not enough. I want to make a bigger impact. And I said, I'm looking for a job, so good. I'm gonna work in the waste, like recycling, waste reduction, field. And so I went to NECRA recycling update. It was March 2016. And after that, I went to the recycling, introduction to recycling class. With Arthur Boone and talking with other people in the class and being like seeing that plastic recycling is very complicated, very complex, that actually not very much, there's not much recycling. We were talking about solutions, and that's really during that week that I had the idea for Feel Good. And I really had the milkman in head. Like my vision was the milkman. Like that's how I explained to people at first. And yeah, that was just, I said, okay, let's do this. Let's start a refill service to eliminate all the plastic packaging. And so I can show you. So can I don't know if I cannot share my screen. Is Bonnie online to give me access?
You should have sharing capabilities. Is it denying you?
I don't see it. Oh yeah, share screen. Okay, sorry. Yeah, got it. All right. All right, so that's the store right now. That's how it looks like. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's what I was saying about this turtle. And so what we're doing, so I took 2016 to develop the concept, and then in 2017 we started. So it all started with the home deliveries, because I thought it's super convenient. So of course people will be, will sign up immediately. It's, it's easy. And so the way we did it in 2017 is that we, the products we get in bulk are packaged in glass jars. So just regular mason jars. And now we have a whole kind of jars. And we deliver at home in these bags. And when people are done with the products, when it's empty, at the next delivery, they just leave them out. We pick them up and we give them the new refills. So that's super easy, super convenient. We deliver once a week in each area because, like, it's not just about waste, it's about sustainability in general. So deliveries, there's a carbon footprint, obviously. So that's why from the start, it was like one delivery day each week. In some areas, it's even every 2 weeks. And we also offset our carbon emissions because we're a green business as well. So that was the start. And then it's funny because at first I was not envisioning stores because I thought it was too complicated, that people will not want to just take their empty containers and come to a store and refill. It wasn't convenient enough. I changed my mind because there's actually a whole lot of people who are super happy to refill their containers in the store. So I opened the first one in March 20 and in Albany. And then last year we moved to a bigger space. So we're in Berkeley on Solano Avenue. So this is what it looks like. So we have all these giant bulk containers, and we also have a lot of plastic-free like shampoo bars and bamboo toothbrushes and things like that. So in total, it's we have about 80 products in bulk. There's no food. It's all about home bath and body products. And we have about 450 products total. We also have a jar library that you can maybe see here at the bottom under the 5 gallons. So people bring us glass jars that they don't want anymore, and we clean them, and they are free in the store, free to use. So people who come and just forget a jar, and they'll return it next time. So we actually get a lot of glass jars. So I would say behind the scene, how does it work? So from the beginning, I really had, like, for me, it was, okay, I'm going to do that. But in the background, it has to be a closed loop system as well. Otherwise, it kind of doesn't make sense. And so the companies I work with, we get the products in bulk. So in these buckets, as you can see, or in these 5-gallon containers, or for some brands directly in individual size packaging. And when they're empty, we just ship them back. And they clean them and they refill them, and it's a completely closed loop system. So like some brands are local, which is even better. And others are some places in the US. It's hard to check all the boxes. We're trying to work with local brands as much as possible, but sometimes they just don't want to take back their containers. So we look for someone else. So far we do about 1,500 refills per month total. So that's same amount of plastic bottles that are avoided. You were talking about the competition, and the market. So in terms of targets, like anyone who wants to reduce plastic waste is welcome to the store. It's great because we really have like kids that are in 10, 11, 12-year-old, and they bring their parents and they're like, hey, mom, look, these are shampoo bars. You can avoid plastic. And then we have really all ages in the store, like people who come and are like, yeah, when I was a kid, it was like that. We had the milkman. So it makes total sense to them. And then in terms of competition, that's what Neil was saying. Like we are really up against, like we're small, but we're really against that linear economy, that linear system with these brands and that rely completely on plastic. It's mass production. They're not accountable. They're not held accountable for what they're producing, for all the plastic and all the pollution. So we often have people who come to the store and are like, oh, how do you compare to Target or to Trader Joe's or to Costco in terms of pricing? So we're like, oh, we do what we can. For some products, we're actually very competitive. And for others, it's just so so that's for that kind of competition. And then there are more and more zero waste stores that are opening in the Bay Area and in general in the US and in the world. So this is awesome. This is really, when I started in 2017, Feel Good was the only service of that type. And now there's like 5-6 stores all. So it's awesome. It's great news. Like, it really shows there's an interest, there's a growing market, and we have lots of people coming to the store and saying, I'm so sick of plastic. I'm so sick of seeing plastic everywhere. So, step by step, as we say, baby steps. Last number. So since we started in 2017, we've avoided about 15,000 pounds of single-use plastics. So all provided. Finally, so what's next? So because you asked me, John, so we are hiring. We're looking for a retail associate. So if you know someone who's looking for that kind of job, someone who wants to talk about zero waste all day long, feel free to send them my email address. We're also working on a pilot project with Stop Waste to have an automatic refill station in the store. The idea behind it is really to make it more convenient, more easy, faster, and give people a better experience so they will want to refill their bottles, and potentially open another store in 2022. Next year. We'll see.
Oh, that is so cool.
Thank you.
And you've at least gotten one more new customer from trying up tonight. So I hope I can make it worth your while.
Oh yeah, please let me know when you want to come.
I have a lot of questions, and I have a lot of, I can talk retail all day because I got a lot of retail experience, but I'm going to save it because we've got other speakers and we're going to save all the questions for the end. But thank you very much. On the related theme of we don't like plastic, we have somebody else who started a business that makes products that compete with plastic. And that's got to have its own challenges. And Nikki Kozlowski of Winston Supply is going to tell us about them.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So, major congratulations to Stephanie. It's so good to see your face. It's so good to see so many familiar faces here. I haven't seen Stephanie since before the pandemic. And my presentation is far less put together. It's a little last minute, mostly shooting from the hip. So how did we start? So I started this company with a friend. Her name is Heather Itzla, and she's in the back packing orders right now. And how we started is we were both, I would say, aggressively volunteering about, for different organizations in the Bay Area working on plastics cleanup and documentation. And we were really tired of doing beach cleanups. And we came to the conclusion that we wanted to prevent plastic before it entered the waste stream, because as you know, there is no cleaning this up. And so I think I met you, John, during the Berkeley ordinance.
Right.
So I was working mostly in restaurants and working on restaurant waste and disposable packaging. And my business partner, Heather, she had started this company as a volunteer effort for her kids when they were in school. She was noticing all of the plastic waste from back to school shopping and all of these families going out and going to Office Max and Target and Staples and getting this prescribed list of primarily plastic and vinyl supplies every year, and you throw it away and you go and you buy it all again the next year. So what she did was she convinced this school to let her buy all of the supplies for all of the students, and parents would just reimburse her. It was a really small school in Marin. And she would source all of these supplies as zero waste and plastic free as possible. And when her sons got older, they left the school, they moved away. The school kept asking her to come back. And then another school asked her to do the same thing for their school. And so she couldn't do this as a volunteer effort forever. And so she wanted to incorporate, and she and I had met many times at different events, plastic pollution events, and it's a small world. And so she told me what she was working on, and she was like, do you want to be my co-founder? To which I said, absolutely. And that was in 2016. We incorporated in 2017, and we've been working together every single day since 2016. We founded the company by reading the book, the B Corp handbook, and Let My People Go Surfing. And I'm not sure if you are familiar with B Corps, but B Corp is a nonprofit that that certifies companies. It has a very rigorous certification process based on your treatment of your employees, your environmental standards, a number of other classifications that that show that you are doing business for good. You're for profit, but you're also showing that you're changing capitalism for the better. So we became B Corp certified in 2018, and then 2019 we were awarded B Corp's Best for the World in the environment category. And so how we started this company was really like a direct to schools approach. We were more of a distributor, and we would work with classrooms and teachers and admin on stocking a whole classroom. And we would source all of the supplies, and we would stop every parent from going back to school shopping, and they would save money because when supplies are purchased in bulk, you cut down on costs, but you also significantly cut down on waste. And we would host these annual locker cleanouts where we would document all of the waste and all of the behaviors of the students. And you won't be surprised to know that it was just the end of the year trash dump. It was like, empty your backpack. I don't care. I need to go home. It's summer. I'm out of here. And we would find entire binders full of paper headed to landfill. We would find spiral bound everything headed to landfill, pencil cases, full landfill. And so we estimated, like very conservatively, that it was 6 pounds of waste per student every year. And when you multiply that by 54 million students in the United States, it's a lot of waste. And when we would stock the school and the classrooms, and we would do locker cleanouts at the end of the year, there was no waste, because teachers are also in charge of inventory, and the teachers aren't throwing everything away and then repurchasing. So from that model, at the time, we did that for about 2.5 years, and we had prevented over 3 tons of plastic waste from entering the environment. And our vision for that model was that as we would grow, we would bring on more schools, and the bigger we got, the more waste we would prevent. And then COVID threw a wrench in that business model, because no one's going to school anymore, and they're certainly not sharing supplies anymore. So we had to pivot from a distributor to direct to consumer. And during this time, the company we were working with for binders went out of business. And so we also had to start making our own products. So with the pivot to direct to consumer, we also started to make all of our own, well, most of all of our own proprietary products. And we've grown 633% year to date since that switch. So we've been busy. And I want to show you guys some of our products. This is our current packaging for our binders. It was designed for retail so that people can understand what it is. We're going to be making a big pivot with our packaging, and all of our messaging on our packaging is going to be on the packing materials so that it has a double purpose of it's shipping materials that also has packaging, so we can cut down on things like unnecessary boxes. But our binders are the only binders on the market that are 100% recyclable. They're made out of 100% recycled materials. You guys are waste nerds. You will appreciate that all of these recycled materials come from the United States. I mean, we don't import waste anyway, but where the binders are made is where they grab the materials for recycling and they turn it into a cardboard binder. And why these are recyclable is because you can remove the 3-ring mechanisms from the binder. So it's a binder kit that you build yourself so that when you're done with it, you will know how to take it apart and you can recycle the cardboard cover and hold on to the 3-ring mechanisms. Because all other binders are permanently affixed mixed materials. So unless you're tearing and cutting off the cardboard, it's landfill. And they're also made in a factory that is powered by wind. Next up on the list that I'm excited to show you guys about is our student weekly planners. All of the weekly planners that are handed to students every year, most of them are, I've never seen one that wasn't spiral bound or didn't have a laminated or vinyl cover, which means all of that paper goes to landfill unless you're page by page ripping out each piece of paper. So ours, we worked with Marin Sanitary to come up with a binding style that and a cover material, which is just a thick cardstock. So you could just put this straight into paper recycling when you're done with it. If you were a superstar recycler, you would remove the cover from the interior pages, because you guys know that different types of paper have different values. So the office paper on the inside is more valuable than the cardstock cover. But we've intentionally designed it to be very minimalist for students. There's no distractions, there's no time zones or goals charts. It's just space for your assignments. And last little tidbit I'll give you about this product is that the color of blue that we chose is called Sargasso Sea, which is a region in the Atlantic that is known for its free-floating seaweed. And it is also severely impacted by plastic pollution. And that's why we chose Sargasso Sea. We also have planners for adults and teachers that are larger and have a larger space for notes, but the same idea can go straight into paper recycling. And this year, I'll share my screen because I don't have a full kit with me, but I do want to show you what our back to school kits will look like. If I could just clean up my desktop here, it'd be great if I had it ready to go. So we're a really small company, we're 2 people, and we have some local college students helping pack orders. But being a small company, we can only afford to purchase in small batches for our proprietary products. So we can only get a very small number of binders for this year. And I wanted to show you guys our kits because we're most certainly going to sell out for this back to school shopping season. Having a little technical difficulty. Here we go. So this kit contains everything a student will need for the year. Just load. We have folders, a pencil case that is aluminum and can be recycled in with aluminum recycling, an unpainted pencil. Man, my computer's having a really tough time. I apologize, guys. I'm going to leave it and I'm just going to show it to you. So an unpainted forest certified pencil, because paint on pencils is plastic. So when students are chewing on pencils, they're ingesting the plastic. And a natural rubber eraser and a wax peel highlighter. And we also made our own folders. And we learned through Martin at the Ecology Center that heavily dyed papers can't be recycled. Well, they can, but they contaminate the batch. So that died. And like, what is it called? Construction paper is very low value. And so our folders are intentionally very lightly colored. They're not dyed, but they're also a very light color so that they have more value. Oh, still not working. Our competitors, that's a tough one because there's really nobody else offering these products or services. We're the only zero waste school supply and office supply company. There are some companies that might offer like recycled notebooks, but aren't 100% recyclable. Everything we make, we ensure that it has value at the end of its life. And we're the only company that I'm aware of that does that in this space. So our competitors are really Office Max and Target and Staples. And we can't compete with their pricing because they're very inexpensive. But everything for the most part, everything we do is made in the United States. Made locally, and as we grow we'll be able to offer better pricing, but we're really small right now. And I told you guys that we've grown 600%, and we will soon be hiring. If anybody knows anyone who would like to come to a warehouse and pack orders, we're really fun. We play music. And we talk about food all day. So if you know anyone who is interested in any of those activities, and we hope to expand and continue to grow and eventually pivot to a distribution center where our products can be shipped. We are shipping nationwide, but we're still like hand packing everything. It would be really great to get more efficient and move to a distribution center. And if anybody knows any contacts in the world of packaging and recycled corrugated packaging, that would be extremely helpful because we have a lot of custom packaging ideas that we would like to reduce the amount of newsprint that we use and the amount of void fill that is necessary. And for our binders, and I'm wrapping this up, they come in a envelope with our screws and posts that you build the binder with. We need a better way to package these items. And that's my presentation. That's what I got.
Well, thank you very much, Nikki. I mean, I'm inspired listening to it. I think Neil would agree with me that one of the great things about small businesses, and by that I mean Main Street businesses, is that they can have things like COVID and be nimble and pivot and try to find a market niche. And I'm sure you've worked your ass off to do that, and it hasn't been fun. And we're all coming through a bad time, but thank you for sticking with it. I appreciate that. And I thank you for coming and sharing that with you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thanks for including us.
I know that when I try lawsuits, and I'm one of the few lawyers that I know that goes into trial with binders. I have everything organized in specific ways. I don't come in with boxes and boxes of documents. I come in with a binder, and whatever I'm going to do is in the binder. So the next time I try a case, it's going to be with your binder.
Hope you're comfortable building it.
Well, that might be a challenge, but I'll try.
It's
I
really
think, I think these presentations also show the ingenuity of small business people who are mission driven, not only to succeed in business, but to make a better world.
Absolutely. I mean, you wouldn't know from Wall Street that we had a pandemic. I mean, my goodness, but we all feel it. So, again, thank you. So we have one more person to talk about their business, Will Bakx. But before that happens, we have one more reading from his archive segment. And I called it out specifically because it highlights something I think is critically important to the zero waste thing, which is if you're going to recover resources, going in, you have to have clean resources to recover. And the more contaminated the crap is, the less you can recover. I mean, the milkman didn't come and collect your empty bottle and have it filled with toxic inks and glass and junk like that he had to clean out. So that's important. So because Susan Kinsella is a much better reader than I am for this, she's going to read the final segment from Will, and then I'm going to ask Will to talk about his business.
Okay, thanks. Let me make sure my mic is on. Okay. So Will is talking about how he looks at composting. And I thought that it was amazingly helpful in thinking about all of recycling as well. So he says, the way we thought about composting had nothing specifically to do with recycling. Composting was about building soil. We used agricultural materials that were available in the area, plus our own discards from the farm. I had become an expert on composting. I was getting invited to eco-farm conferences. I talked to landscapers about compost and how to apply it to the soil and what it did to the soil. And we ran that compost business for years. We got great acknowledgement about what we were doing. We made great compost. We sold everything that we made, but the income was not enough to pay for the operations. We stuck with it because we loved what we did. In essence, I had found my passion. Around 1990, the California Integrated Waste Management Board, which today is CalRecycle, asked me if I could do a talk about markets for compost. And in my talk, I made a clear distinction between two kinds of composting operators with very different outcomes. On one hand, I told them, you will have operators who will treat organics as a resource to feed the soil to get a positive plant response. Customers will buy that compost. They'll use it, they'll come back for more. The composting companies that do composting this way will not be able to keep up with all the demand. And on the other hand, there will also be people that still see organics as a waste that we need to manage, and composting it is the way you divert it. They'll take a tipping fee, but they will have no clue what to do with the bad compost they will make. They will have no market for that material. The simplistic view says, I have waste that's organic. The government wants me to divert this waste. Okay, so I'll process it so it meets the requirements they specify. And after that, I'm going to see who wants to take that material. For the waste manager folks who only look at diversion, not soil building, there is no customer. I look at the same problem in a very different way. How can I take this resource and enhance it to the maximum so that it actually meets the needs of the customer? How can I apply it in such a way that it doesn't do just one thing, like waste diversion, but many things simultaneously? So I will process it in a way that is as clean as possible and has few adverse effects to the environment. And now, when that compost goes to the soil, it conserves water, it builds soil structure, it's an integrated pest management tool, it sequesters carbon, and it reverses global warming. My compost has all these functions associated with it, going all the way back to the soil. That is the way that we did composting using a systems approach. It means a shift in how we think and how we are. I live it when I make compost. I don't let it go until I feel like it has life in it. And that's the test, right? That's really where environmentalism comes down to earth. It feels like we need to get reconnected.
So Will, with that introduction, I'm sure that you have hours and hours of stories you could tell us about being in the compost business, but what can we do to save the planet? What are you doing to save the planet? I think you might be muted. Will, I think you have to unmute yourself. Oh, okay. Whoop, no. You muted yourself again.
Mute. There we go. Someone help me out. You
All
can
right.
hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying, first of all, thank you for selecting me for the interview for the archives. It was great to read back. It had been a long time that the interview took place, and you did a wonderful job in grabbing the interesting parts of it. So I much appreciate that. Two things before I do this here. I was the milkman from age 11 to age 16. And actually my dad was also the milkman, and he didn't even have bottles. People would come with cans to him, and he had these big galvanized containers, and they would just ladle it into the containers that the people brought to his cart. So, you know, it's like that was the world before bottles and plastic and stuff like that. And then the other thing that I quickly want to put out here is people talking about ecological packaging, sustainable packaging. I've always stayed away from bagged compost materials, potting soils, for instance, that I'm developing right now. And if anyone has a lead on zero waste bags for compost that you will hold up, have integrity, get back to me on this here. I'm shopping for it. So getting to my little spiel out here, and let me make this here full screen. I'm not going to say too much about this here because this was covered already in the talks. I'm going to talk a little bit about you know, it's like what has changed and where are we going. And you know, when I started composting, it was pointed out is, you know, really looking at what are these resources that are out there. In the beginning, I was doing agricultural byproducts, including some fish waste, like we had a sea urchin company that did sustainable harvesting, and I would take all the sea urchin shells and incorporate that in the compost, which made musical compost because the little spines broke into little pieces, and when they bang against each other, they made music. It was absolutely adorable. At that time, I reached out to the county many, many times and said, hey, I could really use the yard to be going into the landfill for my composting industry. And I got always the same answer back. That is not feasible. It was just like a headache to them. You could not do that. In 1989, AB 939 passed. And guess what? Suddenly, yard debris composting became not only feasible, but a necessity in order to reach their goals. My vision remained the same. It was like, this is still material that is a resource and not a waste to be managed to create better soils and get a positive plant response. In 2016, SB 1383 passed to reduce emissions. But to me, that was like not enough if you look at it just to reduce emissions from the landfill. Yes, that is great, but you got to take it all the way through. And so I looked at this as a three-panel approach. Is that, first of all, what we try to do by maximizing organics diversion is minimize emissions from the landfill. Then you create a compost facility. What we did in the 80s, setting up these windrow compost facilities, that was the technology that was available at that point. Is it great technology? No, we still get emissions from the compost. There are zones of anaerobic composting in there that give off methane. Every time you turn it, there's a lot of emissions coming off the compost pile. We can do better than that. So look at if we can design compost facilities that use less diesel but go all solar, and cover the piles with organic matter that acts as a biofilter so that you reduce the emissions by about 85%. And then you use the end product not only to enhance the soil, conserve water, and et cetera, what was mentioned earlier, but actually to sequester carbon in the soil so that we can actually play a very active role in mitigating climate change. So part of SB 1383 was procurement. And I always had a big problem with procurement because I mentioned to Calvin, I said, why the hell would I need the government to procure compost if I sell all the compost that I make and I can't even make enough to serve my customers? Why does it have to go through this other channel? And I never could convince them to make an escape clause in there where the municipalities could sign off to a composter the responsibility to make sure that 100% of the organics would be sold to the market. So we're stuck with procurement. And so what I've introduced in Sonoma County, we have a carbon sequestration working group. And we got together, it's like discuss things, what we can do, but we never really came to action items. And I said, I really don't have time to meet without action items. What about if we put procurement in light of carbon sequestration? And then it makes more sense for the government to be involved in it so that they can manage that. And I'll play a big role in it and do education, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're looking at right now in Sonoma County is I believe that the agency is responsible for about 55% of the materials that will be diverted out of Sonoma County that they would have to procure. Well, if we could dedicate that all to carbon sequestration and monitor that and actually measure how much we sequestered, we could show what a great contribution we can have in mitigating climate change. Backyard gardens were important to us. We really focused on market diversion. There hasn't been, it's like if you have been doing this since the mid-'80s, we've had many recessions. We've had the fire seasons, the paranoia about fires, biomass reduction, et cetera, et cetera. We've had diseases coming in, many different problems. But with a diverse market, your company will always survive because it will just adjust from one market to another. One thing that I never get is when you go, for instance, to Southern California, any big municipality, they never look at the municipality itself as a market. And to me, if you have a city, take Los Angeles, and they say, well, we want to ship all our compost to the Central Valley for the farmers. Yes, it's easy. You can sell compost by the thousands of yards, but that organic matter came to a large extent, except for the food scraps, out of the city. You have a lot of green in the city and a lot of emissions produced in the city. You need to sequester that carbon in the city. And we need to educate these municipalities that, yes, there is a market because they say there's not enough market for it. There is, but they have to look in the urban areas for the market. And yes, you sell smaller amounts, 10, 15, 20 cubic yards per lot or something like that. But there is a huge market out there. Competitors, I never look at people around me as competitors. I've always been a very open book. I believe that all competitors around me have been at my side. Recology, Republic, Waste Management, our local composters, they have all come to my side and participated in workshops that I've given out there. I talk about marketing as an open book. I talk about composting process as an open book. To me, if you can match my standard, be my guest. I think we get a better industry when we do that and a more secure industry. So I'm here to basically help the industry as a whole grow. The MRELO, the model water efficient landscape ordinance, has been widely underused in the landscape industry. It prescribes that mulches and compost have to be used in new landscapes and redesigned landscapes. The Healthy Soils program is a great market for compost and mulches. Carbon sequestration is help open the market up, and there is really no need for competition. We can all sell everything that we make out there. I stayed out of specialty blends. That's what a lot of my competitors went into, and say, yeah, you can have that. It's like I stay on the big bulk sales, and you can make these specialty blends and make that your niche in the county. And then, it's like, and I emphasize, like, make what the customer wants. It doesn't matter what you think is a good product. You need to make something that the customer really wants to buy that material from you. So how will we promote zero waste? Organics is a huge fraction of the waste stream. And so by diverting organics from the landfill, we actually participate to a large extent in how we get to zero waste. I include in that that there has to be waste reduction, even in organics. I do a lot of talks about that people need to do right-size planting. It's amazing how many people plant these big shrubs right next to the front door that will hide the front door after a while. And all the people do is prune to keep the door free. You know, it's like put plants in the size that you want them in the air, so you don't have to do as much pruning. I've worked with the California Organic Recycling Council as a founder, being the chair of it many times. California Compost Coalition was basically working on regulations and legislation affecting the composting industry. And I founded the California Compost Quality Council, which basically set standards for quality compost, which we then turned over to the USA Composting Council, which is now the SDA program for quality control managed by the US Composting Council. One of my proudest moments as a lobbyist was taking on Dow Chemical when the herbicide clopyralid reared its head in California. 6 attorneys showed up at every meeting. The attorneys had access to the senators directly, and we could meet with staff up in their offices. That was an uphill battle. I once got handed an envelope by the attorneys of Dow Chemical. They encouraged me to open up the envelope. I told them that they didn't want to know what's inside of it and handed it back, and sought to fight through to the end. We got a bill through that said if that herbicide was used in California, then you could not take that plant material to a compost site, and the sales of clopyralid nosedived in California. That was a great win. Dow Chemical, within 3 weeks, got a bill through on the national level that no one could adopt a bill like we had in California. It's amazing how fast they can work. And then I've been a critical voice on compostable plastics. There is a bill being worked on right now in California that actually incorporates everything that I wrote a position paper on in 2008. They pride themselves on how cooperative they are, that they want to work with us. It took them 15 years to address points that I've been talking about before they actually take action right now. I don't call that cooperative. That's like stalling the process in order for this year to move forward. And then I still have a big problem with it. Yes, we may be able to compost this here, but it is still a single-use plastic. And I think it still sends the wrong message if we want to get away from single-use plastics. And that is my presentation. This picture out here, by the way, is a pilot program where we work with UC Berkeley, where they measured emissions coming from windrow composting. And now at some point, we're going to compare that with covered aerated static pile composting and see how much we actually can reduce in emissions from the compost site. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Are we going to save the world with compost?
I don't think we're
Yes.
going to save the world with compost, but I think we can make a great contribution to making a better world. And one of the reasons why I want to really get the urban communities involved is a couple-fold. Number one, that's where people are that the most people are that will vote. And if we can increase the awareness on how compost through carbon sequestration can mitigate climate change, then we can vote more politicians in office that actually will take this issue seriously and pass legislation.
Yeah.
We now see farmers advertise that this produce has been carbon farmed, then we can actually help agriculture move in that direction, because they can select, just as they select for organic, that they can select, I want to have carbon farm produce to save this planet. And so I think these are really important aspects why the public has to be involved in this here and get familiar with compost and what the benefits are.
Well, Will, thank you again. I mean, it's an interesting discussion when you're dealing with how to create a business and make a successful business, and then you get sidetracked with the politics and the regulatory side of it. You probably didn't think in the Netherlands when you were digging in the dirt that you'd have to deal with politicians someday to do what you wanted to do.
Never. I never thought that I would become a lobbyist.
but small businesses all have to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm going to turn this over to questions to each of Will, Stephanie, and Nikki and Neil. I'm going to take the honor of asking the first one just to get the thing going, because I'll try not to take it over because I can do that. But Stephanie, I was interested. We've had a pandemic. You have an in-store operation and all the things that goes with having a lease and an in-store operation that you want to expand. You have a delivery operation. What do you prefer? Isn't it better to get customers that you can touch, and how do you balance that?
I prefer the stores. I prefer just being able to talk to people and answer their questions. And we have some customers, like we have awesome, amazing discussions sometimes because some of them really want to help. And with you know, any online business is very, like, you don't talk to people. It's all automatic and there's no sense of community like there is with the store. So I love the store. I started all online in 2017 and now I'm like, it's great because for some people that's what they want to do. It's super convenient, but having the store takes it's a whole other dimension where you can really create a community around waste reduction. I can work with, like, around me there are restaurants, there are coffee shops, and we can talk about how they can reduce their own waste. You know, it's a whole different level.
Right, but you have one store and it's in Berkeley, but yet you're reaching people all over the Bay Area because of the delivery. So what has more impact?
Right now, the stores has more impact because people love shopping. People love being able to come to the store and just smell the products and ask us questions. And so it's funny because it's really the opposite of what I thought when I started. But I realized that no, like, people really enjoy shopping and just enjoy being in a store. And every time they come in, apparently it smells really good in the store, which I don't realize anymore. But so yeah, I love it. It's much better.
Neil, you had a question? But you have to unmute.
I do have a question for Stephanie, but first I want to say I grew up working in a perfume factory, and going back and forth on the subway smelling of perfume started a lot of conversations. But my question to you is, Nikki pointed out that her products are really saving a lot of money besides cutting down on waste. Are your customers, let's say, how much do they save, and how much do they save by not having to deal with packaging other than a reusable package?
Yeah, so it really depends on the products. For some products, because also I really want to focus on sustainable products with non-toxic ingredients. Like, I'm never going to sell products like Tide in bulk. It's for some products, it's going to be the same price as what you can find in a Whole Food. So it's not a low price. From other products, though, they can really save money because one of the brands we work with, they make concentrate. So it's much cheaper. The customers just have to dilute. And then for some products also that are reusable, you can really save money. But you have to invest. Like, one of the best example is a stainless steel razor. And all you have to do is replace the blade, okay? And the blade costs 30 cents. So it is much cheaper than buying a new, like, single-use razor. So, but at first you have to invest $30, $40 in your razor. So
that fits with what I knew growing up in that industry. The cost of the bottle and the label was higher than the cost of the ingredients in the bottle. This was shampoo, cologne, and liquids. So I completely understand how you could save money by eliminating the package. Thank you. And thank you, Nikki. These are inspiring stories making big impacts. That's really great. Saving 6 pounds a student a year a term or a year, however you measured it, is quite an impact. And of course, getting people their good products and reusables is wonderful. In fact, my daughter lives in Montclair, and they just opened up a similar store in Montclair, New Jersey, so she's quite thrilled.
Does anybody have questions for our panelists before I go into interrogative mode? Dan?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Will a question. Will, as you know, your full interview is about 45 pages long, and I lived in that interview for about 6 weeks while I was editing it. And I wonder, there was a lot that was left out. I know that the parts that have been read are only about 6 to 8 pages of the total. So one of the things that really struck me as very promising was your concept of a soil bank, and the idea that farmers that you know, most of them do not actually own their own land, and you want a carbon bank that pays them for increasing the carbon content of the soil. And that would be something that it could actually be taken with them if they get kicked off the farm, so that they could take that carbon credit with them elsewhere and spend it elsewhere. Can you go into more detail on that?
Yeah, sure, love to. Yeah, it's something that I hear a lot from younger farmers that don't own the land. They lease the land, and they've worked on improving the soil, raise the organic matter from say 1% to 5, 6, 7% organic matter in the soil, which gave them great benefits in water savings, in productivity, in reducing weeds in the farms, etc., etc. Now they're going to get kicked off that farm, and all the money they invested in growing that carbon in the soil is gone. And actually, most likely, particularly if it goes to a development and they're going to build homes on that land, then that carbon will be completely lost. That is a resource that we do not value at this point. There is no monetary value on that. And I think it's time, if we want to save this planet, that we have to monetize that value. And so what I like to see is that we create some sort of a closed carbon bank where the money can only be used. And I want to have a firewall on capitalism out here, because capitalism is about extracting money out of it, you know. It's like, and so this has to be a regenerative economy in a closed system where we have a pool of money that is being used to grow carbon in the soil. And so when this farmer moves away from the soil, that 8% carbon has a certain value. And believe me, that carbon value, the closer we're going to get to the no turning around point for humankind to live on Earth, that carbon value is going to go up and up and up to find solutions to save the planet. And so we set up a carbon value for the soil, and that farmer now gets paid to build that soil somewhere else. If the owner of the land is now diminishing the carbon in that soil, then he has to pay for the carbon that's being lost to the atmosphere and put that into the bank so that we can restore more land to regrow carbon again. That's the idea behind this here. And it's pretty much, you know, it's like, what made me think of it, Switzerland has its own second currency besides the franc. They never participate in the euro, they still have the franc. But I believe it was in World War I, they set up a currency because the banks would not loan to the farmers. And they set up their own currency to loan to farmers. And actually that currency is still alive today to loan to farmers. And this would have like a similar concept, except would be very specifically built around carbon.
Thank you.
Doug?
Yeah, for Will, I got a question about one of the slides you showed was 100,000 tons per year of compost, and that's with only 1% going to landfill. That's an incredibly efficient operation. I presume that's plant debris as opposed to food waste.
That did not have food scraps in it, indeed, and that's and we did a lot of education to the public in order to keep that contaminant rate as low as possible. With my new facility, my goal is still with food scraps that I will not exceed 3% contamination by 3 years after I'm in business. Because to me, I think that people are trainable. It is just, it's like we have not done enough in it. And actually a lot of the big garbage companies have taken a different route. It's like, you can contaminate the material as much as you want, and we'll post-process it at the end. To me, garbage in is garbage out. It's like you can never clean that material up to the fullest extent. And so my emphasis really work with the people, get them to respect the material, and get them to understand that they are dealing with a resource. And yes, they have to pay to get rid of a resource. And that's the hard part. It's like to sell to people. But that is the way it goes. And Sonoma County, I think, is the ideal playing ground for this, because we are pretty progressive out here, that I think that I can set that standard.
Will, where is your facility located?
I don't have it anymore. This is the interesting part. I had a very, very successful company. I had the environmentalists supporting me. I had the farmers community supporting me. I had the landscape industry supporting me. Republic took over the landfill, and they had a meeting with me. And they said, Will, within the year after we take over the landfill from the county, you'll be out of business. And somehow the neighborhood received money. You can imagine where they may have gotten the money from, filed a lawsuit against our company. And even the water board wrote a letter to the county saying, we do not want to put this business out of business because they provide a service to the county that is invaluable. And that letter was never shared with other municipalities in order so that they could close down our facility so that Republic could take over the landfill.
That's a long, ugly story too, Will. I'm sorry. I would love to have you share it more of it. But Nikki said something that has been pricked my ear, and I have to ask a question about it. I know that you're a B corporation, and I know that means that, making profits is not the end all be all. And I understand your competitors, some of your competitors are retail chains like Home Depot that has way more buying power than you do with manufacturers. But you also said that you compete on price with them. And I'm wondering, why do you have to compete on price with them? A lot of niche businesses that are mission driven, sell their story along with their products, and they don't compete on price. Why wouldn't that work for you?
That's a great question. And we are totally not in comparison. We're definitely more expensive. I think, and Stephanie brought this up as well, as like, it's just a question that you're constantly having to answer is like, well, are you cheaper? Are you cheaper? People want to know, like, can you save them money? I can find this stuff cheaper on Amazon. And a lot of people understand, and they love the mission, and they love the story, and we definitely tell that story. And we're way more open about our story too. We used to be kind of like embarrassed that we were such a small, like, cowboy operation, but now we're like, nope, we're two people in a warehouse. So that's what you get. So I think there's like, when you're asked that question so often, you kind of like grow a defensive skin of like, you have to kind of bring it up before people ask of like, can you compete with Office Max and Staples? And when we were stocking classrooms in bulk, you were getting less stuff than what you were getting on your back to school shopping list. So like item by item, were more expensive, but when you switch to our model, you're getting less, but you're spending less, but you're only really getting what you need because these students are just throwing everything away that they're not using. So you're right. We do sell the story. We do talk about the mission and the value behind our products, and how we're not mass produced. But it's just, you're competing with people's expectations of what they will pay for a binder or a planner. And that's just the world. Amazon, everything's cheap and everything's fast and everything's free shipping. So
they're saving the world, and they're not.
That's true.
They're not going to space either.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I wish we could sit people down and be like, okay, look, this is Amazon's supply chain. Like, this is their labor, like this is what they're doing, but not everybody knows these things going in, and you only have a couple seconds with some people. So, but for the most part, most people understand and they get it pretty quickly.
Do you have anybody that can sell it for you? Are there, for example, when I represented Pet Food Express, they made an incredibly smart decision to support rescue centers, because when people adopt pets and they get a little free bag of food with it, they go back to the pet store. And so the rescue centers were selling the company and selling the story. Who can do that with you? The school?
Well, we used to be the schools because they would sell it to the parents. We were doing wholesale, and I know Heather just sent Stephanie an email about this. We were doing wholesale with like local resellers, and not local resellers, people like in Wisconsin who opened up a zero waste store. It's actually really incredible how many zero waste stores are opening up around the United States that I would have had no idea about if they hadn't reached out, but like all in the most random places that you wouldn't think of. And that was great. But the challenge now that we're faced with is having enough product. We don't have enough product. So we need, and with making our own products, you need like a major outlay of capital. And we didn't have that problem before because we were resellers. So we could buy 200 binders at a time, or 400, and then wait and then order more. But now we need to buy thousands of these products. So it's a big cash outlay. And we know we won't be able to keep up with demand for the back to school shopping season. So we hope that next year we can expand and have enough product for resellers and for wholesale, and then we can get into stores. But right now, we're just trying to hold on to our hats with direct to consumer.
Are there enough like-minded companies so you could form a buying group and be able to buy more product through that or get better pricing?
Maybe if they were open to paying us in advance, if it was like a pre-order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was wondering, if you could have like a co-op buying, it's like, and do it that way. And with this, it has potential, and maybe that it's a co-op that could apply for this year, but for a GoFundMe campaign, it's like where you can raise the capital that you need to actually kick the production up and get what you need.
Yeah, we're gonna start a equity crowdfunding campaign pretty soon.
Yeah, because that seems like you're ideally situated for that, and it's like maybe have an introductory price for people that contribute into it as the payback for it, as they often see out there, but make it lucrative for them to invest in it, and you end up with a capital that you can get your mass production going.
Yeah.
I was thinking the exact same thing as well. Excuse me, Mary Lou, I'll be just a second.
Oh, that's fine.
But you don't have to share your business, but I just wanted to, I don't know how much you're talking about, but another reuse group, not quite your group, but Repurpose Center down in Gainesville, they went to the banks and they got all, couldn't raise money to buy their expanded warehouse. It's a reuse project, a business. And they went to their supporters, and their supporters came up with 200,000, and their supporters framed the loan to help them, as opposed to a bank that will give you a loan to screw you, whatever. So if it's I don't know the amount of money, but you may just find that your network will support you.
Absolutely. Yep. We are setting that up now. We're like writing all the details for the crowdfunding campaign. And if anyone's interested, I think the best way to learn about that, we'll make an announcement on our newsletter. I can put our website in the chat, and then you could sign it if you're in. We're not like email marketing people, so we're not going to get a lot of emails from us.
2 people in a warehouse.
Yeah, exactly. And we're busy packing orders. So
you do that in between.
Right. Any other questions before I monopolize this?
Mary Lou had a question.
Mary Lou?
And two after if I can.
Well, I wanted to make a comment in response, John, to your question about can't you sell your story? And I just, in Urban Ore's experience, Urban Ore has been doing retail for some time now. Today, in fact, is our 40th anniversary of incorporation. So we've been doing this for a long time, and we sell our story all the time, and people love it, and they love us, and they think our story is terrific. They love our purpose. They love it that we're trying to make money, but we never sacrifice, our purpose and our motivation for that, and they just think it's a wonderful thing, and then they ask us for a discount.
Been there.
So, they can love you to death.
Well, if you
Well,
have,
yeah, and
if you
just
have
this
something
morning,
nobody else has and that people really want, you don't have to do a 20% markup on the product. You can do a 50% markup on the product, which makes a big difference. So,
Yeah.
Stephanie and Nikki have products that nobody else has. Urban Ore has lots of stuff that nobody else has, but you have to go look for it. So,
just this morning,
Well, it's non-virtual, that's why.
just this morning, I got an email from Steve Lautsy, and he said, we're doing a crowdfunding campaign or a different thing anyway, but basically he wanted donations to East Bay Depot for creative reuse. They have a elderly truck that got stolen a month ago, and they're kind of dead in the water without their truck, so they need money for that. So I ponied up some money from Urban Ore, and it turned out that by the time I got to it, they were already at $1,875.
Great news.
They're heading up real fast, I think. And I got a nice letter back from Steve saying, thank you very much for your contribution.
Mm-hmm.
We put in 500. So, I think this method of funding can pay dividends really quickly. Another thing that happened with us was right at COVID, when we were scared to death and we had closed down for 3 days and we finally figured out we were an essential business. Our staff got together with some friends of theirs, did a crowdfunding thing, and that raised $20,000 for our health plan. And they put it out that way. They said, we want our health plan.
Please save our health plan.
Continue it. And we raised about 20,000 before the thing was over. It was real fast. And they did a wonderful little video. I mean, I couldn't believe the quality of it. It was amazing. And it was all employee done. They didn't even talk to me about it or Mary Lou that I know of.
Nope.
So Will, I had a question.
Yeah.
In your talk, you went through several different things. Among them were, there are specifications that are important. There's the importance of being a market maker. And I'm wondering, from your point of view, particularly given your history, where does government fit in? How can government best help compost? Should they regulate it? Should they make markets for it? What would you have them do if you were God?
Well, I think right now, and I'm just looking at the hurdle that we have to overcome. SB 1383 passed. We need about 100 new facilities in California, the size that Sonoma Compost was, that will take in about 100,000 tons per year. Many compost facilities have been in permitting for about 3 to 5 years and still not running. And some of them actually are holding off in even starting to run because it is almost impossible to get a facility permitted at this point. The air board, for instance, it's like every time they have a compost facility that permit, the next facility has a higher standard. The next facility has a higher standard. And it's really the highway to hell for composters. So I think that, and I think air quality is a perfect example here. So we are actually the solution to SB 1383, which is on emissions from landfill, which falls under the responsibility of the air board. And so we are their solution. And instead, they're actually putting up the roadblocks in permitting compost facilities. So if I get to build my compost facility in Sonoma County, I have already set up a system where I want to be the fastest permitted compost facility in California. Right off the bat, I would sit down with the air board, water boards, local government, et cetera, bring them all in one room and set up ground rules. One little trick that the air board has, for instance, played with is you go to the EIR, they get to see your plan of what you're going to build out there, and they get input to it. You certify the EIR. Now you're going to go for an air permit, and they say, okay, we want you to change, open up the EIR again. We want you to change this here. That, in my rule, will not exist. You had a chance to look at this here during the EIR. You will not open up EIR again and make additional requirements in the permitting process. When the EIR is certified, you thereby will grant a permit for the compost facility. So those are the kind of things we need to work on, because else you just go in a merry-go-round that you're never going to get permitted. And we need the facilities now to meet our goals. And so they're shooting themselves in the foot. We're not saying don't regulate the compost facilities. We're saying make it workable. We can work around having standards set and building compost facilities that are actually beneficial to the environment. But let us know where we stand, work with us, but don't keep us hanging for years and years before we can operate. That's expensive.
That sounds like a lot like the low-income housing advocates, the people that want to build low-income housing. They want a streamlined process.
That's what you need. Absolutely.
So,
and I think that's doable. I have floated this around, and I have a lot of interest from many groups that say that this really makes sense to do so. And then once we have, if I get to lead this program, and I invite any compost facility actually to take the lead on this here, so I don't have to have the headache. But once that's in place, that can serve as a blueprint for other facilities to follow as well.
So in a triage of either lead, follow, or get out of the way, you'd like government to get out of the way.
Yeah, but it's not that I want to get out of the way. I think they do have a responsibility. I must say, I don't trust people, particularly when they come from a capitalistic point of view. I don't trust them. It's all about extracting money, and the external cost doesn't count for them. I really think that we need to live, and we as environmentalists, soil science, from a organic recycling point of view, we need to be responsible in what we do, and we have to look in our own house in how we can build a facility that actually is environmentally sound. And we have right now technology that can do that. We can reduce emissions by 85% compared to the windrow composting that I used to do. We should do that if that's available. Capital cost is not what runs the cost for a compost facility. It's operation cost. And it's like, and so spending a little bit more money to build the right facility is the right way to go. But we need to know where we stand. And that's something that the Air Board needs to do, is say, it's like, we give you a security of how you can permit these facilities.
Thanks, that's very interesting. Does anybody else have questions for our panel?
I have one question for Will. So in my past career, I worked on biogas with farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved I was in France, and when I moved from France here, I was surprised to see that there was almost no biogas facilities. Yeah. Did you ever study this? Like, why?
Yes. Actually, the plant that I was proposing for Sonoma County had an anaerobic digestion facility associated with it. I'm actually going to remove it from my plan. And the reason for this is, in Europe, you have two things that make AD possible. The tipping fees for organics recycling are much higher than here in the United States. And the price of energy is much higher in the United States. So on two ends, you're going to get more income. Now, we have at this point for renewable natural gas incentives to do renewable natural gas for transportation. And that gets a very high dollar per joule or whatever unit you want to put it in. The problem with that is, with the turnover of the government, and Trump comes back in office in 2024, God forbid, but those incentives will be removed. And so how can you as a company build a sustainable budget on the high price if that's not guaranteed for a long time? Because my contract will be for 30 years. And so that's a real dilemma. And I think that makes it very scary. The petroleum industry has long-term guarantees on subsidies they get from the government, but for alternative energy, it does not exist. That puts us at a competitive disadvantage that I think makes it very difficult to bring AD to the United States.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. In France, there was a whole system where you get credits.
Yeah.
I guess that's true, and you make money.
And they're long term. If you do that for the project, they're there for the term of your project. They don't do that over here, and so that brings with it a huge risk factor.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Neil, you're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. In our follow-up, in our part of the country, DC, Maryland, even up to New York and down to the Carolinas, their European companies as well as American companies are just trying to get bonded low-cost loans from the government to build AD plants. One is coming in probably this year in Jessup, Maryland, equidistant between DC and Baltimore. There seems to be rapid investment in it. Do you see this as a threat? If this were happening in California, would this be a threat to the composters?
Well, I don't think that AD should stand by itself. I believe that the digestate from an anaerobic digestion facility should be diverted to a compost facility to actually turn the organic matter from that facility in a stabilized form, be a nutrient source for the other compost, so that you can put a high quality product back on the market. They take mostly food scraps in the AD systems. Well, that's how we can really improve the nutrient value of our compost. And so what these AD plants do a lot of times is they put zero value on the digestate. They just find a way to get rid of it. That is not soil building. I think that, to put another term out here, I think we need to start looking at ecosystem values. And, look at, it's like, what does the organics industry look like? And what are the components that they actually bring as stacking function to ecosystem value, and have investors look at that and say, I want to invest in that value. And that will promote something different than just a capitalistic structure. Now they're going to invest in what the intrinsic value is of this ecosystem design.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I'd like to say something from the perspective of the Recycling Archives Project. We now have roughly about 55 interviews, and of those about 20 or 25 have been edited. All the way through, there's a theme of recyclers being shut down, attacked, marginalized, pushed aside, regulated unfairly, treated unfairly. What we're up against is a predisposition to waste, and it's a zero-sum game. Every time we take a ton of anything out of the waste stream, and we call it the discard supply, the wasters lose, and they are in power. And somehow that power, that clamp on power by people who are trained to waste and think that is the natural order of things, has to be broken.
Yeah.
And I think that is really the task for the younger folks. You have to start looking long-term at breaking the power of this monopolistic wasting industry that thinks that wasting will always be with us, that it's sort of their God-given right to have anything that is made, put in the ground, destroyed, however it's done through incineration or any other kind of Rube Goldberg contraption that probably won't work for more than a year before it's shut down. These are old stories in this field, and they keep happening over and over again. And we have to break that monopoly power.
Well, one thing that the ZWAC is trying to do is share this kind of information, so we're at least aware of it. I know Mary Lou had a question, and then Will.
Well, I wanted to ask, following on Dan's comment, to break the monopoly power, since it is a zero-sum game for the service, I wanted to ask if, while people are considering how to break that monopoly, if they factor in the fact that the monopoly wasting contracts, collection contracts that most municipalities let out, the municipalities get a kickback. And people don't talk about that. It's the money back to the city that they rely on in their general fund that recycling doesn't offer them. And I think we need to factor that in. So that's just my only comment.
How do they get, I'm not familiar with that. How do they get a kickback?
Is it the franchise fee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the franchise fee. They get money back when they let a monopoly agreement out to a collector like Waste Management or Republic or whoever. They get a franchise fee. Now, recyclers do not have never offered a franchise fee. So what can we advertise for our site? I am of the opinion that our businesses must be better inherently for the economy, certainly for the municipal environment, than any wasting business is. But I think we need to develop our perspective and our calculations in order to make an argument on behalf of our industry financially, because cities are not willing to, they're not willing to talk about this stuff in public because, well, I don't know why, but I speculate that maybe they just don't want to let their citizens know that they depend on garbage. It's like, I always said, you can't make your money off the devil and then say what you want is the angels, because you're making your living off the devil. So they don't want to let their citizens know they're making their money off the devil. When we are the angels, what are we going to say? And that's what I want to know. How can we fight that franchise fee?
I feel like it's very related to, Alina has a question on the cost, like the cost of externalities. And the fact that, I don't know if there's any study that shows the positive impact of recycling, reusing, composting, and the amount of money that city government saves by going that way instead of going to the landfills. And it's related to reduction in emissions, maybe more jobs and things like that. I don't know if there's any study that shows, hey, if you do that, then that's how much money you're going to save, and it's maybe bigger than that money that they get from landfill or from wasting.
I don't know of any study either, and I think we need to have some. We need to do this analysis.
There are studies, though, on how recycling provides a lot more jobs than the wasting industries. So there are, and even going back further, there were studies that I think, Neil, you were involved with too.
Well, Brenda did that work.
Yeah, and there was also, how do you compare it to hard rock mining and things like that? So there's pieces of it, but it certainly needs to be updated too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and factored in, with specific comment for the municipal budget.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a city. I'm losing my franchise fees. You can talk to me about potential jobs all you want. I have a budget deficit if I give up my franchise fees. What are you going to do? What are you going to say about that?
Sonoma County at times has had non-exclusive franchise systems where the recyclers paid franchise fees too. What if Urban Or paid a franchise fee?
Yeah. Another idea.
In addition to the service fee that we charge,
Right.
Well, Mary Lou, I agree with you. It's a kickback, but let's say for a city, it's $1 million. Why can't they just reduce the cost of services by $1 million? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but is that conceivable, a way of handling the problem?
Well, if you reduce the cost of service, what are you then eliminating somebody's job? And are they a Teamster or SEIC or some union that's going to get so totally in the face of city council? The city council will never do a thing like that.
Okay, I think this is a difficult problem.
It's just a question. Yeah.
It's 7:30.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
It's probably a little controversial. Zero waste is part of the 3 R's, you know, reduce, what is it?
Yeah. Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah, the reduce part. Has recycling stood in the way of effectively work on reduce? In other words, we find markets for recycling, and now we need to feed the recycling industry in order to support that recycling industry, and actually working on reducing where people do not have to recycle anymore might undercut some of the investments made in the recycling industry. And in Europe, for instance, a lot of incinerators were built to deal with, because they said that you could not get over 60% recycling. Well, right now, at the position they find them in, yes, you can get higher than 60% recycling, but they cannot afford it because they have these fuel hogs that they built that need 40% of the waste stream in order to pay off the debt that they have on there. And does the recycling industry stand in the way of reduce, in other words, produce less waste?
I think, if I may, I think in two ways. One, of course, are the bottle bills. Industry, the Coca-Cola wants to be a good recycler, but they don't want to be a good refiller, obviously.
Right.
But the second, I lost my train of thought. It had to do with getting rid of bottles. It'll come back to me. I apologize. But my first thought was that is one of the problems.
Yeah.
If I may, when we talk to our customers or everything we publish about the 5R and the zero waste mindset, we always say recycling comes last.
Yeah.
Like first, refuse, reduce, reuse, but recycling like rot, compost, and then recycle.
Yeah, I thought of my comment. I wrote myself a note to remind me, and that is the aluminum can. The aluminum can is an environmental sin. To use aluminum and all the energy for your soda and then throw it away. Yeah. But if you talk to recyclers, you can't go to refillables because we need the aluminum cans in the recycling stream to make money. It's perverse. Right. So I think that is another way in which, quote unquote, recycling hinders source reduction.
Yeah, and I think that's something we need to look at, because what we're doing is we are basically wasting a lot of resources through recycling still, and this earth cannot sustain that process, and it needs to be addressed head on at some point.
Also, aluminum.
We also have to look at the problem that if we really have our way with everything that we want, we're going to kill the consumer economy all over the world. So what are we going to do about that?
Well, why do you say that? Because they're still gonna get products, they're just gonna get different packaging.
Yeah, I think the change is in quality, not only quality of life, but quality of products. There's what some people are calling the small economy of scale. I forget the term, but the intangible things like having a job that's flexible or being able to walk to work. Those are the areas in which life can be improved without more production of things, goods. So I think the quality of life is the area that will hopefully we'll get a chance to see this, will substitute for people's satisfaction from consumption. In fact, there's a wonderful book that was written, I read the book once every 10 years, 1972, Limits to Satisfaction by William, I think it's Leis. William Weiss, I think it is. And it just goes into the cycles that not we personally, but that the greedy people have led us into, which restricts focus on quality of things and substitutes consumption of meaningless things.
Well, one thing's clear to me is that we're not going to improve things unless we talk about them. So one of the main function of these monthly meetings is to talk about things that might make a difference later on. And so to that extent, thank you, Neil. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Nikki, who's not on the call anymore. And thank you, Will, for joining us and sharing your story. Because, you know, I